Hello, welcome to AEDT 4120 Serious Gaming and Simulations, Week 5, Learning Theories Part 2 of 3. I'm the course instructor, Stephanie Fisher, and over the next few minutes, we'll be discussing Learning Theories Part 2. However, prior to doing so, here's the list of analysis questions for this particular video clip. Number 1, what is experiential learning? Number 2, what is activity theory? Question 3, what is transformative learning? Question 4, what is reflection in action and reflection on action? The first learning theory we'll discuss in this clip is experiential learning. Experiential learning is a holistic perspective of learning that combines experiences, perception, cognition, and behavior. But simply put, it's the process of making meaning from direct experience. An example of experiential learning is going to the zoo and learning through observation and interaction with the zoo environment, as opposed to reading about animals from a book, or a book about the zoo. Thus, one makes discoveries and experiments with knowledge firsthand, instead of hearing or reading about it or others' experiences. Experiential learning is often used synonymously with the phrase experiential education. However, experiential learning considers the individual learning process, while experiential education should be considered a broader philosophy of education. The theory presents a cyclical model of learning that shows how experience is translated through reflection into concepts, which in turn are used as guides for active experimentation and the choice of new experiences. Experiential learning situations are typically inductive, learner-centered, and activity-oriented. Experiential learning can be viewed as a cycle consisting of 4 to 5 phases or stages. The first stage, experiencing, is where the learner actively experiences an activity, for example, a lab session or fieldwork. In the second stage, the learner consciously reflects back on that experience and shares those reflections with others. The next stage, analysis, is where the learner attempts to conceptualize a theory or model of what is observed, and principles are derived from this. The last stage is where the learner applies this new knowledge to new or forthcoming situations or experiences. The next theory we will look at is activity theory. Activity theory is a conceptual approach to understanding human behavior by examining the social context of the behavior and the motivations of social pressures on people as they engage in activities. Activity theory is most often used to describe actions in a socio-technical system through 6 related elements of a conceptual system: the objective of the activity system, the goal, the subject or the actor, the individual learner, the social context, that is everybody involved in the activity system, tools, that is artifacts or concepts used by actors in the system, division of labor, the division of activities among actors in the system, as well as rules, that is conventions or guidelines that regulate activities in the system. The basic premise is that an activity, or work, is understood to have a basic purpose that is shared by others, and is undertaken by individuals who are motivated by a purpose or towards the solution of a problem, which is mediated by tools and/or signs used in order to achieve this goal. The activity itself is constrained by cultural factors, including conventions and social organization within the immediate context, and framed by broader social patterns. For example, a carpenter uses a saw and a hammer to produce a house out of wood. However, the carpenter building a house is not alone in this world. He works together with other carpenters as well as other building workers. The ensemble of carpenters divide their work between them. The ways of doing work is grounded in tradition and shared by a group of carpenters. This is called praxis. When getting trained as a carpenter, one gets to share this praxis. At the same time, each individual who holds a praxis continues the praxis, and he or she changes it as well by coming up with new ways of doing things. It is this praxis that allows us to talk about more than just individual skills, knowledge, and judgment, and not just about a generic human being. In other words, we can talk about the appropriateness of a certain tool, like serious games or simulations, for a certain praxis. Because learning, knowledge, and activity are intrinsically interlinked, learning is considered to be a socially mediated activity. In sum, activity theory helps explain how social artifacts and social organization mediate social actions such as learning. It is a conceptual framework that can be used to understand the interrelationship between activities, actions, operations, and artifacts, subjects' motives and goals, and the aspects of the social, organizational, and societal context within which these activities are framed. The last learning theory in this video clip is reflective and transformative learning, which means learning through and from critical reflection. Reflective practice is the capacity to reflect on action so as to engage in a process of a continuous learning, which, according to the originator of the term, is one of the defining characteristics of professional practice. Reflection in action is like thinking on your feet. It occurs during the event, and little time is given or available to do so. Therefore, recalling these kinds of reflections may be difficult or of limited use. When reflecting in the moment of action, prior experiences and knowledge are drawn upon and applied within the unfolding situation, adding to the individual's wealth of experience that is already in place. On the other hand, reflection on action means evaluating the activity after the event has occurred. Here, the entirety of the event is considered or reflected on, making the reflection more indirect than reflection in action, which is specific. Reflection on action can also be more formalized. Writing, recording, and other recall methodologies may be used to analyze an event, actions, and outcomes. Critical reflection can lead to transformative learning, which involves the reconfiguration of ideas, knowledge, and meaning, stimulated by a process of critical reflection. Here, learners are empowered to identify and incorporate new learning as their own. An important part of transformative learning is for individuals to change their frames of reference by critically reflecting on their assumptions and beliefs and consciously making and implementing plans that bring about new ways of defining their worlds. This process is fundamentally rational and analytical. An example of transformative learning includes using video to record action to review later. The incorporation of videos in this learning process can help with reflection both in and on action, and via facilitated discussion after the event. Reviewing the video can result in a transformative restructuring and development of action plan and new learning goals. So, for example, a researcher who wants to work on their in-depth interviewing skills may watch recordings of their interviews to identify not only areas where they can improve, but they might also realize that their frequent interruptions to the interviewee creates an unequal power dynamic that results in the interviewee feeling that their knowledge and experiences are not valued, and thus they begin to hold back information or become reluctant in giving information. The researcher then learns to adjust their worldview, the one that gives them authority over the interviewee, and instead begins to relinquish control to the interviewee to get the most out of the interview. This concludes clip 5.2. Please consider the following questions to be discussed during tutorial. Number 1. How does experiential learning relate to serious games and simulation? Number 2. How does activity theory relate to serious games and simulation? Number 3, how does transformative learning relate to serious game and simulation? And how can reflection on action be realized with serious games and simulation?